Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the only podcast where we share the secrets the wealthy know to build generational wealth. And I couldn't be more excited about today's episode, where we're talking about your number one asset, which is your business, and how to intentionally grow the value of your business. And in today's episode, we're talking about one of the 8 key drivers to company value. This is near and dear to many of our hearts. We've experienced the joys and the pains of this one, and that is called the Switzerland structure.
A business should really remain as neutral as possible, meaning that they should not be overly dependent on any one key employee, any one vendor or supplier, or any one client and its revenue that's coming in through that client.
When that top client of yours who represents 50% of your revenue comes to you beginning to complain a little bit, what happens inside of you? I mean, all of a sudden you start freaking out, because it's what happens if you start running those what if scenarios, and then you're acting from a place of desperation rather than confidence. All right, so there are a lot of topics when it comes to company value. As John Warrillow outlines in his book Built to Sell, and then went on to systematize into the Value Builder system, there are 8 key drivers to company value. We are certified value builders, so this is a lot of the work that we do, but we know for you as a business owner, this is one of the keys to building generational wealth, is to have a solid business. And I mean like a traditional business, whatever that looks like. And we are fairly industry agnostic to this. It's these things apply to any company. And the focus of our conversation today candidly came from Aaron, because I said, Aaron, what do you want to talk about today with company value? And Aaron said,
The Switzerland structure.
why? Why would we talk about that today?
Because it's so important and it's often overlooked, and it's something that I have personally experienced recently.
Yeah, I have as well. I actually think a lot of people have experienced this. So probably nobody even knows what we're talking about when we say Switzerland structure. But as John Warrillow would describe it, it's like Switzerland as a country decided to remain neutral. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was through both world wars. It was actually a neutral company. It never selected a side. It's just known for being this like kind of just nebulous space where that's just everyone's happy. Let's just all get along. And in business, well, Aaron, would you describe kind of your understanding of Switzerland structure as you see it in the value builder world?
Yeah, it's that a business should really remain as neutral as possible too, meaning that they should not be overly dependent on any one key employee, any one vendor or supplier, or any one client and its revenue that's coming in through that client.
Hmm. And I think this is the piece where I think a lot of people can relate, whether you've had a job before and perhaps you experienced layoffs because, hey, we lost our biggest clients. And so, therefore now we can't afford to continue to do business. And without getting into like nitty gritty details, I'll just tell you at my last company, we experienced this from on a multiple, like this is inception of Switzerland structure, because we had too few clients that we were depending on from a structure, income structure, and the recommendation is not to have income coming in from or more than 15% of your revenue coming from a single client. We had that, so more than 15% of our revenue was coming in from single clients, and those clients had not adhered to Switzerland structure, and they had one of them had 50% of their revenue from one single client. They lost that client, which meant that they could no longer afford us, which meant that we now had a massive loss in revenue. And so there's this like domino effect when you have too many companies in a chain that's what the problem is. So what do we do about that? I mean, what's the solution? Bob, what questions do you have about Switzerland structure?
Well, it's interesting because one of my first like real jobs, I did computer aided drafting, and it was a family owned business. And the daughter was the general manager of the business, but she was also one of the sales reps. And so she made it sure that the largest client was hers. And the problem to that is the same problem you experience, is that, is as they stop buying, well, so does the revenue. And what was interesting was it was somebody who was in a leadership position purposely structuring the business that way for ego or pride or whatever. That to me was a lesson I learned significantly to this day. I mean, I was in my early 20s and now I'm 48. So it definitely stands out in my mind of how we build our business and work with our clients. So I guess my question would be is what can we do to help a business in that situation? Right? What do we do in that situation, or any of these situations that you brought up, Joe, or the one that I brought up?
I think one key area that we help businesses with is with their operations and their structure and their culture. And so, it's great to have a couple key employees who are loyal and they know their job very well, and you think they'll be with you forever and you hope that they will. But the reality is that you have no idea, a better opportunity comes along, a health crisis. And so you have to be proactive in cross-training your employees so that more than one person owns that area. And this is harder for small businesses who only have one person, oftentimes wearing many hats, and they own that. But there has to be, where everyone can at least has a basic understanding to be able to step in the interim so that things don't fall apart when an employee decides to leave.
Yeah, because you're not going to have people who stay around forever. It's not the way it is.
What about those situations where you have a business owner that's responds where with that when we're having that conversation, Aaron, you're having that conversation with them, talking about operation structure and culture and what we're going to do to help in that situation, and the business owner says, oh, well, we're like family. That to me, that's like the first warning sign.
Sure.
Right?
That's usually there's a moment where you've got to grow up as a company.
Yeah.
I remember I used to tell this in one of my earlier businesses when employees would come on. I would literally tell them, and this was like a selling point to me. I would tell them, I want your business email at our company to be the last business email you ever have. Like, I'd love for you to retire from this company. And we'd use words like family and that sort of thing. And the truth is, that's true until you have to fire somebody. That's true until, I mean, they don't own the business. You're the business owner. You're going to be married to this until you exit it. And hopefully that's part of your plan.
Yeah.
So
Because I
you
think
have to
some of
grow
it,
up out of that.
yeah, because I think some of it too is, are you going to make big boy business decisions with your family? Are you going to confront your family and let them know that these things need to be changed and addressed? Or are you going to treat them like family and just coddle them? Right.
Right.
I don't know what the definition of we're like family means, right? There's
Right.
different family dynamics.
This could be good. It could be bad.
Oh no, I take him out back and I beat him, right? I mean, obviously I'm kidding. I'm not condoning that, but I mean, there's different structures. So, Aaron, you brought up operation, structure, and culture. All three very, very different purposes of a business. Can we talk through each of these with you guys and from a Switzerland perspective? And if it means it leads to another key driver, we can do another episode on that particular part of it. But specifically to the Switzerland, how do these three things affect a business? How would we handle that?
So I would say the first thing is this is very closely related to another of the key drivers, which is called hub and spoke. And it's how central you are as the owner of the company to everything. Like, think of, spokes of a wheel that all attach to a hub. The more central you are, the more dependent your business is upon you as a key employee. You can see how those are correlated, the less value you'll get. I mean, it's literally, people they don't want to buy a company so they can then step in and be the hub. They want to buy a business, whether it's a strategic purchase or a financial purchase. They want to have those systems in place. And so Aaron, I think, brought it up really well as it pertains to both of those drivers. One of those is, what are your standard operating procedures?
Mhm.
And that's early coaching that Aaron and I do with people, is we're talking with them about, where are your standard operating procedures? Where's the manual? To Aaron's point, if you don't have another employee yet, that's okay. Do you have your manual for how you do things? And this is something that most businesses are lacking until you get to a certain stage. And then there's whole process orientation people that will do this for you. But this is something that's very easy for you to begin to tackle. And I would suggest a few things, action items. If I was giving coaching to somebody, number one is just make a list of all the things that need to be manualized. Just make a list of it, from how we answer the phones, to what our signature is on our email, to how we make the coffee in the morning. I mean, literally everything that needs to be done should be a process that is documented. So the first thing is just make a list. It's going to feel like a long list. And then what I've encouraged people to do this previously is just do one per day. Don't think of like having, I don't need to set aside 2 weeks and go through it, just one per day. And we have, for those of us or members of our coaching program, we actually have a process to create processes. I know it sounds a little bit weird, but it's a process for making processes. It's a 12-step process. And so if you can just follow that, just one a day, you're going to get through it pretty quickly. And that will help substantiate that it'll substantiate also you looking at and going, when do I hire somebody? That's a question that we get asked often, like somebody who's transitioning from being a solopreneur to, I want to be a quote unquote real business owner. When do I make that decision? And some of this will help you determine that. So that's just like a couple minutes on like part of the way to do this. And remember, this is just one facet to the Switzerland structure. So without getting too wrapped up into like the granularity of just like the employees, this is also income coming in from other people. So you've got to recognize that you have a problem if this is a real problem. So just rank your customers or clients in order of revenue that comes in from them. Tally up the total and then divide it by that top one. If it's more than 15%, you have a problem. You need to begin to diversify that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which I think then is an interesting conundrum, because this is the one that I experienced, where one client was 50% of the revenue. And as a business owner, you're not going to not celebrate that. Like, wow, now we have this big client that's paying us a lot of money every month. And then you realize, oh, I have a problem. I need either my other clients to pay more, or I need to get more clients in. So the other key drivers play into that. So just like, you know, they all fit together. And so we as coaches can come in and tell you the areas that you need the most help in. And oftentimes when you are too dependent on one client, we're going to examine, how can we break into new markets? How can we introduce recurring revenue for the first time to alleviate that? And it doesn't happen overnight, but at least the awareness of knowing it's an issue is a very positive move.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, it's like, if you don't recognize that it's a problem, you will feel the weight of that problem when it becomes a problem. And this can affect people. So the mindset, because that's a lot of the work that we do in the coaching side, is with the owner's mindset. And I can tell you what happens is, when that top client of yours, who represents 50% of your revenue, comes to you beginning to complain a little bit, what happens inside of you? I mean, all of a sudden you start freaking out, because it's what happens if you start running those what if scenarios, and then you're acting from a place of desperation rather than confidence. And so that can sometimes induce like a lot of negative to the cycle as well. So I think that I think it's, Aaron is exactly right. Do we need to take our current offering to more markets? Do we need to take a different offering to our current clients? Or do we take the riskiest path of all and take a new offering to a new market? But I think getting creative at looking at how your revenue is coming in. And sometimes this is a sales team conversation. We need more volume of clients if we can serve that, or just understand that there is a risk to this. And I think there's a really unique play with some of the financial solutions that we offer at Terra Firma. So, Bob, I'm thinking with the ARP. If you lose that much revenue, there is actually insurance that can be in place to help protect you from that. With the key employees, if you're overly reliant on one or two employees, Bob has solutions that we could, spend episodes talking about. How do you increase retention of key employees with a real benefit to them? And even in the case that they leave, there's an asset in their stead, to take over. So I think there's a lot of different strategies that go into play here. So when we're looking at, and the last one that I'll touch on right now is on vendors. And anyone can think of a lot of different stories where vendor relationship fails, and all of a sudden, at no fault of your own, you are out of business because your vendor failed. Bob, we had one of our members where he had built up very rapidly, because he understood marketing, very rapidly built up I think it was a $20,000 or $30,000 a month revenue stream. His sole supplier in China had there was, I think it was one or two color options of like many. There were like dozens of color options, one or two that they couldn't supply anymore. And so they stopped all orders. If that color was even in the order, nothing got shipped out from it. So all of a sudden he had his customers going online, writing negative reviews for his products. It basically negated his entire business like that, no fault of his own, but because too much dependent on a single supplier. So you have to be thinking about these kinds of things.
Yeah. And in that type of situation on the terra firma side, to your point of ARP, one of the coverages and one of the protections and risk managements is loss of key supplier or contractual relationship, right? To where if there's a 20% or more change in revenue due to an event, not your fault. Yeah, that's big deal, because now who cares about your culture? You have
Right.
no culture.
Your culture doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist anymore. You're out there looking for a new culture.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So I think all in all, Switzerland's structure, and again, Aaron said this well, they are all interrelated. So financial performance is tied into this. Hub and spoke is tied into this. Growth potential is tied into this. There's so many that are there. Recurring revenue is tied into this.
Yeah.
There's so much that's out there. And this is why, I think we choose to look at not only the business owner holistically, meaning spiritual, family, business, financial, fitness, like what is their whole life, because that's all showing up with them at work. We're also looking at their business holistically. What are the 8 drivers, not just one? And I have yet to find a company who comes in where they're just spot on, they're just clean across the board. We do have people come in who have very high initial scores in the value builder system, but there's always an area that can improve. And for the most of the people that we're talking to, when we make those subtle adjustments on the back end of their valuation, we're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of impact to them when they get these things right. So I know we're gonna, Aaron, I'd like to hear your parting, thoughts about this before we leave this episode. But I think this is something that we should regularly come back to with our business owner clients. This is absolutely must listen content, and we have a lot of resources to help you. But Aaron, oh, Bob, you've got a question.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, those business owners where they do have a high score, are they revenue profit wise tend to be on the higher end of revenue and profit? They're much more profitable than somebody who doesn't have a higher score?
Yeah, typically a company that is generating more revenue will trade at a higher multiple. So if you're, and some of the numbers get kind of silly. It's like if you're under 1 million, you're kind of degraded value. If you're between 1 and 10 million, it's increased a little bit. When you start getting above 20, 30, 40 million, now because it's a much more stable ship. People are buying something that's very stable typically.
Yeah.
So the more revenue oftentimes does lead to a higher multiple. And this has been studied across the value builder system. They've had, I don't know what their latest count is, 70,000 plus companies that have gone through their questionnaire. So they're pulling from a large data set. And then that data set is substantiated from a valuation perspective with thousands of transactions per year of companies that have gone through that value builder questionnaire. So their data is really spot on. A lot of the advisors that are certified value builder advisors are mergers and acquisitions or business broker type folks. And so when they see the value, they're able to give an accuracy rating, and they estimate it's about 95% accurate.
So I think your explanation proves the point of why like in our situation, if I can toot our own horn, why we have a terra firma in the tax side of things and we focus on the financial, because to your explanation of that answer, right? There is now that opportunity to plan for that. And so all under one house, so to speak, here, and being able to provide that solution to that next value and that next step. Because whether you sell your business for 3 million or 30 million, if you're giving 20% or more to taxes and others, that could be yours. That could be yours. So that's interesting. So anyways, thank you.
So I think the value builder system and the 8 key drivers, such powerful tools in the toolbox of a business owner. And I love that it is just a step-by-step process that has been proven to increase the value of your company. But there are things that, like we touched on culture. That's one thing that I'm witnessing us coaching some clients on currently that doesn't necessarily fall under the value builder. Same with bringing in EOS and the L10 meeting. I think back to my last corporate job and how our weekly meetings were the bane of my existence, because they would go 4 hours long and I would get out of there and be like, I just spent half my workday in there and I don't think we accomplished anything. And it was so frustrating. And so now to witness the L10 meetings, it's like, wow, we just got so much accomplished in 90 minutes. And like, that is something that we do. So I think there's a lot we can talk about here with the value builder system, but then there's other things we can bring into. So I think there's a lot of great content here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the concepts, yeah, so much of it does stem from that, and that's where we can substantiate value. But to your point, Aaron, I mean, some of the work that we get to do, especially in the L10, what I like to tell people, because we're pretty good at teaching people how to implement some of these things. And what always gets a chuckle, because I think people can relate to it, is like, there's no more congratulations for surviving this email turned into a meeting. It's like, how many times do people feel that? It's like, we spent an hour and a half together, we got nothing done, and what the result was could have just been an email that was sent out to everybody. So that will degrade top performance inside of you will repel top performance people by the minutia that you're creating. So get really serious about that. And again, this is like more of a strategy for retaining that culture and retaining that top level talent. So I think it's important that we're paying attention to all of this. But when it comes to Switzerland structure, again, you want to remain as neutral as possible in reliance on your employees, spread that workload. And again, most of the business owners that we work with are doing well over $1 million a year in annual revenue. So they are likely have a team of people. Make sure that you're not overly reliant on any one person. One of the ways to help with that is make sure you've got your standard operating procedures. By the way, have your team write those. You don't have to write everything. Have your team write it and explain it to you. You may not even know a lot of the facets of your business. They're the ones who are experts in that. Also, same thing with vendors. Make sure you're diversifying those relationships. Make sure you've got backups to your backups. If this one goes down, where do I pivot to immediately? And then obviously with your clients, make sure that you're at least analyzing this. Be aware if it is a problem for you. And if you want actual, specific guidance and advice, that's what you can pay us to do. We're happy to help you with that. As always, if you've got questions or you've got specific scenarios that you'd love for us to address on the Wealth Maverick Show, we're going to circle back to the other 7 drivers, and we'll intersperse these throughout here. So make sure to drop your comments. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. If you're on our Facebook channel, make sure to leave comments or send us private messages. You can always email us too if you've got our emails, but we're happy to create content that's here specifically for you to help you grow your business, which is your biggest asset, so that we can help you then save taxes from all of that and work holistically in your life. So we appreciate you listening, and we're here to help however we can.